Well, hello there. My name is Pollux Thane, and I'm a Year 1 student in the Concurrent Education program at the Aurelia campus. I live off campus just 30 minutes south of Aurelia and Barrie. I want to be a kindergarten teacher after school, but as of right now, I am a cook, dishwasher, and occasional host at a microbrewery pub called Barnstormer Brewing and Distilling Company. Because I live off of campus, I have a guaranteed hour every day to just think to myself while driving there and back. And after completing the readings for this module, I found myself thinking about this assignment using that time. I thought of how, before the readings, if I had to describe myself to someone who wasn't from Canada, I wouldn't describe myself as native or a newcomer. But after the readings, I would have to reconsider if it was best to use these two definitions as well. Like I said, if in September I had to describe myself to someone who wasn't from Canada, I wouldn't think to use the word native. And I think that is because of what the definition of the word has become. To most people, the meaning of native is one of two things: something only found in a specific country or place, or an original inhabitant of a certain place. I think the two definitions sort of split apart when the now obsolete term Native American became more politically correct than the discriminatory word Indian. Something that is native to Canada, according to the first definition, would be something that can be only found in Canada. Something that is native to Canada, that is native to Canada would be an original inhabitant of Canada, again, according to the common definition. Before the readings, I thought that both definitions were true for native, but after the readings, I think my idea of what native meant changed. To me, after the readings, native doesn't have to mean an original inhabitant. I was born in Canada, and after the readings, I would describe myself as a native to Canada, which follows more closely to the first definition, as I can only be found here and nowhere else. Just like a kangaroo is native to Australia because it can only be found there. The next definition that before the readings I wouldn't consider to use to describe myself would have been newcomer, mainly because I've lived in Canada my whole life, just as my family has for many generations. To me, before the readings, a newcomer would be something that is new to a country or place, be it person, animal, plant, etc. A newcomer who is a person to Canada would be someone who recently moved here, hence new in the word. But after the readings and a little time to think, everyone who wasn't First Nations or Inuit would be, by my previous definition, a newcomer. My ancestors at some point made their way over to Canada, potentially as early as the 17th century, and relatively in human history, that's new. Even if the theory is correct, the ancestors of First Nations made their way to North America from Asia, but even to me that was a stretch, just my mind overthinking. But it made me realize that a newcomer does tie in with an immigrant, but the word new does not have as much of an impact as it did before the readings. After thinking, both native and newcomer could apply to me as if I had to describe myself. However, if I have to describe myself using only one word, it would simply be Canadian. That word didn't change to me from the time before the readings to the time after, because it has always been an encompassing word of anyone who decided to use it. I don't think that someone can be more Canadian than another, and that's the beauty of the word. A First Nations person can be Canadian, an immigrant from a foreign war-torn country can be Canadian, I can be Canadian. It's a choice to be Canadian, and an important one at that. But if a First Nations person doesn't want to identify as Canadian, that is their choice. If an immigrant does not want to identify as Canadian, that is their choice. If I didn't want to identify as a Canadian, I would have no obligation to do so. No one can be mad or upset that someone doesn't want to identify as Canadian because that itself goes against what Canada stands for. I have such a variety of words that I can identify as that doesn't have to be limited to Canadian. But what makes being Canadian so great is the inclusiveness of it. Anyone who lives here has ties here, or dislikes the ideals of a Canadian, has the freedom to identify and express who they are, and if that happens to include the word Canadian, then all the power to them. That's what makes Canada so different, is that anyone can be Canadian, whether they be native, newcomer, or anything in between. Goodbye.